Okay. So thank you, Mr. Firodia, for your precious time. And you have an outstanding CV and resume. You're a leader, a pioneer, an entrepreneur. And also what is very interesting is culture and ethics are central to your life and purpose and mission, and also to your father's history and heritage. You are chairman of Force Motors and which is a manufacturing conglomerate with about 15,000 staff, and you trade globally. And it's just a fascinating business which started as a family enterprise. So I'm quite interested in looking at finance and organic business. And I wonder if you could if I could start by asking you a little bit about the history of the business and the role of finance in it, Thank you.
Well, let me say that we have always been very conservative about finance. The business started when my father decided to enter industry. This happened during his incarceration in a jail in India during the freedom struggle of 1942. My father was propounding that India will soon become independent and we businessmen should not be in trading but should be in manufacturing. My father was a lawyer like my grandfather before him. So one of my father's friends said that, look, it's very easy for you to say that you enter industry where we have to make an investment and take a risk, whereas you are a lawyer and all the capital that you risk is that pencil that you keep above your ear with which you correct your brief. So is that fair? My father was very much surprised at this and instantly said, all right, when I come out of this incarceration, I will give up my legal practice and I will do industry. True to his word, he decided to go into industry. My grandfather was also a very outstanding person. He was gold medalist of the Bombay University in 1903 and a Dakshina scholar, and he was a lawyer himself. He was a freedom fighter. My grandfather was president of the All India Stanakwasi Jain Sabha in 1950 in Chennai. And he was very supportive of my father's desire not to be a lawyer, but to go into business and industry. But he laid a number of conditions, and those conditions define his view and now our view of how to look at risk-taking. So he said, yes, you can afford to explore for industry for a period of time. So take 5 years and explore what you can do as a good business, a constructive business, not just trading, but something that adds value to society. Second, he said, never pledge personal property. Third, he said, give yourself 5 years, at the end of which, if you have not succeeded, go back to your legal practice. Now, the lesson in this is, there are two lessons here. One is, you must have a solid aim of what you want to do in business. And secondly, you must also ensure that the risks you take are commensurate with your ability to take those risks. You should not be taking risks because things appear very attractive. This, I believe, besides being a point of very high common sense, also reflects the spiritual aspect of the Jain philosophy, which says, limit yourself. Just because you believe that you can make a great gain, don't go out and endanger your family's wealth or your own wealth or well-being. Remain within limits. Examine properly what you are doing. And if you cannot do it, change it. So this has defined our approach to business and industry now for 3/4 of a century. My father was the inventor of the auto rickshaw. The concept of the auto rickshaw did not exist.
Wow.
There were, in Europe, after the war, Piaggio and company were making small 3-wheeled goods vehicles, which were little pickup trucks for carrying around bakery products or florist shops or laundry equipment and stuff like that. My father conceived of the idea to produce an auto rickshaw which would be low cost and convenient. And he designed a body for carrying passengers which was based on the concept of the elephant howdah. On top of the elephant, you keep a howdah which is tied to the elephant's belly, and you enter from the side, and 2 people can sit abreast, and the mahout is sitting in front of you outside of the howdah. So he built, after many experimentations, he came to the final design of a body for the three-wheeled goods vehicle chassis. He called it the auto rickshaw. The word did not exist. Today it is in the Oxford Dictionary. But he created this concept. He created this word. There was a lot of struggle to introduce this into the market. But he persevered. He remained committed to the limits that had been set for him. And gradually he succeeded. In the first few years, he could hardly sell a few, maybe 25 or 50. Today, the company that he started that makes this produces 25,000 per month. So this concept has endured for 75 years. And it is an attempt to provide to the common man of India an affordable taxi. He was very clear in his mind that a passenger car taxi is too expensive for Indians to afford. And they need mechanized transportation. That is the future, and that is where this came from. Now, this defines also our business's view of what we should be producing. Should we be producing sports, luxury cars? What should we be making? So we have always focused as a business to produce utilitarian vehicles, more for the masses than for the classes. But while doing so, every care has been taken from day one to keep the highest standard of corporate governance, manufacturing, engineering, marketing, purchasing. You don't have to be a glamorous product maker to have a company which is modern, well organized, well run, and ethically robust. Our company's telegraphic address, when it started until telegraphs lasted, was Nek Bepar, Nekbepar. Nek Bepar means ethical business. And the name of the company, which today exists and is the holding company of all our other manufacturing activities, which are in different companies, the name of the company is Jai Hind Industries, which means victory to India. So, the DNA of our business incorporates 2 very important strands. One is ethical business, and the second is nationalism. A third strand, which is equally important, is being conscious of the needs of the needy, not the greed of the greedy, and try to serve that. We have the money to enter into real estate and produce super luxury apartments, or if not to manufacture, at least to sell the most glamorous of vehicles. But we have always remembered that we are in business not only to make money. You must make money. You must earn a return on your investment and your effort, and in return for your innovation. But you have to have clarity that you are not driven by profit motive alone. So our family has always maintained this. We do not mix up business with personal family. None of our businesses carries the name of our family. All our businesses are named neutrally. The automotive company is called Force Motors. Our holding company is called Jain Industries. We have a joint venture now with Rolls-Royce to make diesel engines, and it is called Force MTU, which is the German subsidiary of Rolls-Royce. So we have, and throughout, I mean, there have been many companies and formations which are probably not there just now. Always the name of the family, my father and grandfather felt, and I fully agree, is not to be attached to the business. The business must remain on its own. Our trusts, which are endowed by family out of its own wealth, we do not borrow in the trusts. We take no donations. And these trusts are called Firodia Trust and so on, after the name of the endower. So my grandfather started the trust, which my father enlarged, and I have the privilege to run it today. It's called Firodia Trust. My grandfather's cousin, who was like a son to my grandfather, endowed a trust named after his own name. He had no children, and in his last days, he gave the trust to me to say, you run it and run it well. So I have these several trusts which I run, remembering that if you have sufficient money, you don't really need to go to town to try and make money only. You must give back to humanity. I would not use the word society. And therefore, from the very beginning, we have tried to do things which are meant for alleviating the problems and the constraints that society faces. My grandfather had founded an old people's home way back in 1952. At that time, an old people's home was an unknown concept in India. But there is this old people's home which is now 70 years old, which is functioning. So we have been helping hospitals, schools, other educational institutions, cultural institutions, institutions like Virayathan. My father was president of Virayathan for almost 18 years till he passed away. And in the last a little over 20 years, I have been president of Virayathan. We don't run Virayathan. The sadhvis give the direction, and many, many people who are associated with Virayathan take the work forward. The work includes sadhana, seva, and shiksha. Sadhana is to elevate yourself, where you examine your role in life and in society and try and focus on the right objectives. Seva is you create the possibility to be of use to support the needy. That is seva. In modern day, seva is not possible on a personal basis alone. So you need an organization for it. And shiksha, which is in Gujarati or Marathi, it is called shikshan. In Hindi, they say shiksha. Shiksha is not education which is, let's say, about aeronautical engineering or biomedicine or something like that, which is highly specialized and modern, but it is value education. So value education and redressal of problems of the needy and attention to your own motives, your own actions, these are the three pillars on which Virayathan stands, and we support that fully. Now, in all our endeavors, we have tried to keep these things before us. There is one more aspect which I may point out, and that aspect is that we have always believed, my grandfather, my father, myself, that the Indian tradition of the four ashrams, the Brahmacharya ashram, the Grahastha ashram, the Vanaprastha ashram, the Sannyasa ashram, are very important landmarks in life. You live by a certain credo, a certain ethic, a certain motivation during each of these phases. During your Brahmacharya ashram, you are building yourself up. You are equipping yourself with knowledge, physique, courage, with proper influences, with inspiration. During the Grahastha ashram, you put these to use to care for your family, to care for your society, to create wealth. Wealth is important. That wealth you have to create, and that wealth you have to husband, that wealth you have to distribute in the most sensible, most logical, most ethical way that you can. So Grahastha ashram is what a Westerner would say the productive period of your life. Then comes the Vanaprastha ashram. Vanaprastha ashram is the period, having created wealth, having elevated yourself to the stature of a respected, reliable, creative member of the community, you do not fight in the vanguard, so to say. You take a back seat. You allow young people to come forward to do the task that Grahast should be doing. You are more in the role of a mentor, more in the role of an advisor, more in the role of a person who has experience which he can share. You should give advice and you should seek information, but allow those who are operating to take decisions, taking your advice into account, but eventually on their own responsibility. And finally, you give this up too, and only concern yourself with your own soul, with your own thoughts, with your own motivations. So these are the four ashrams. This is the ideal. I do not know of a single person and cannot imagine that through history of several thousand years, there would have been too many people who have been able to carry this out to the T. It's not possible. But this is the guideline for ethical living. And this ethical living is also the foundation for ethical finance. You cannot forget that you have not to be dependent on society, but you have to support society. If you are going to be a supporter, you have to be a producer. If you are going to be a person who is contributing, then you have to create what you will contribute. Otherwise, you are robbing Peter to pay Paul. That is not the aim of your life. So, being productive while keeping these four ashrams in mind and keeping the Jain principles of constraining your desires and wants. That doesn't mean that you should not live. I own private jets. I fly in my jets. But I'm not doing that except when necessary to be able to do a job quickly. So if you have wealth and you use the wealth, but use it in a sensible manner, there's nothing wrong with it. So let me say that these twin directions that have been bestowed on my generation in our family originate from my grandfather and were enlarged and practiced by my father, who retired at the age of 55 and handed over the directorship of the company to his younger brother and to myself. And eventually I became the managing director and then chairman. And some 10 years ago, I handed over the managing directorship to my own son to say, okay, you run it now. I'm there. I will help you. It's not that he always listens to what I say. He takes his own decisions. We are from different eras. Excuse me. He has a different motivation at times. But as long as things are happening in a regulated, responsible manner on an ethical basis, I support him. So this withdrawal from active involvement is also something that our family has practiced. And I've seen it done for 3 active generations of businessmen. And I believe that my son also will have imbibed these values so that when time comes, he is able to also act inspired by the wisdom of the previous generations. Would you like to ask me some questions?
Yes,
Because
thank you.
I've gone on and
No,
on.
no, no, no. That is
I'm
very
not a professor, but I like to talk.
no, it was a fantastic scene setting introduction and it covered so many themes and very relevant to the kind of research I am doing. Now, the way finance is researched and taught, the entire focus is on public companies and corporations, where, in a sense, there is a divorce between the shareholder and the management. Now, yours is an interesting story where it started as a family business and it grew as a family business. Still, the family has a majority stake in the business. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
clear majority.
yeah, and you decided at some point to also go to the stock market, but we can talk about that later. But still, you have the control and the majority share. But this idea of a kind of organic business, because all the kinds of things you talk about in terms of ethics, purpose, I mean, those things are very, and risk, even what you said about risk, it's when you take ownership, you take responsibility. When you take, when you manage risk, you actually feel it as well, and in a sense, as a family, 3 generations, you manage to keep that control, and you have a sizable global business. Yeah. And what would you say about, because the way finance is taught today, it's quite opposite to the kinds of things you said. It's taught as a technical profession. It's almost, ethics has been stripped out of it, so that it's almost like there is a science of finance, and the science is to maximize wealth and profit, and there's no questions about that. And that indirectly, by doing that, you serve society, because you bring more wealth to society. Whereas what you're saying is that finance should be grounded in enterprise. Finance should be grounded in creating something of value, rather than expropriation, which is what it has become today. So can you say a little bit more about that organic, your whole family experience of finance? And I suspect you grew the business organically, isn't it? You didn't take a lot of outside finance.
No, very rarely have we taken any bank accommodation. From time to time, it happens. You have to have bank accounts, otherwise you can't function as a business. You have to have overdraft limits which are available to you. But our effort and practice is to lend to banks and not to borrow from banks. That is the objective, that you will not borrow. So all our businesses are self-sustaining. That naturally puts a kind of limitation on the size of your business. Scale is very important in business. If you are subscale, the chances of your success as a business, the chances that any product that you produce, whether it is a digital product or whether it is a physical product, would not meet the criteria of the competitiveness and quality that it should. So this limitation is there. But if you have, for your kind of business, defendable scale, then to merely grow for the heck of it, or to grow by taking undue risks, or to grow by doing things which will not stand the strict scrutiny of ethics, we will not do. This is our approach. And I believe that there are many, many families who practice this. People may borrow. Borrowing is part of the business, so it should not be looked up. It's like taking a property on rent to be able to do business. So borrowing money is like renting money. So there is nothing wrong with it. But the important thing is the risks should not be such that compel you to lower your standards. When you want to grow in modern finance and you want to make a whole lot of money, you cut corners. And those corners that are cut come at the expense often of ethics. They come at the expense of taking the risk of somebody else's money for your benefit. And this is something which is very wrong. I don't think it is necessary for business to be successful to be able to take undue risks. That is not the nature of business. The nature of business, if you look upon your business, whether it is a private company or a joint stock company, if you look at it as your business for which you are responsible, which you have to grow, which you have to develop, which you have to modernize, if you look at it like that, then even if you take risks, you will do so in a, let me say, conscious, cautious, sensible manner. I have always maintained that we don't really look holistically at the Jain tradition. A lot of people are misled into thinking that the foundation of the Jain ethical thought emanates from Mahavir. I want to submit that this is not the correct approach or view. Mahavir was certainly responsible for a few amazing things, some things which have no parallel. His concept of anekantvad and syadvad is the epitome of tolerance and of responsibility. His advice to the Shramans, the practicing ascetics, the practicing sadhus and sadhvis, to be among people in order to communicate values, to set example, but not be attached to a particular community, be on the move, was the reason Jainism survived the slaughter of shamans in India when the Muslim invaders came and butchered the Buddhist institutions, thousands of monks at one place. Mahavir was, in that respect, a great guerrilla warfare general. He instructed his followers to disperse, not with a view to escape slaughter, but with a view to be able to reach every nook and corner where society was, but this served the purpose of saving them. So these are the great contributions of Mahavir. The third great contribution, of course, is environmentalism. Responsibility to the environment is something which Western businesses and modern thinkers are now beginning to invent as if it is something great that they have just discovered and you better understand what they are saying because you are not following what is right. I find it laughable because in our long tradition of thousands of years, and I do not consider the Jain tradition to be emanating from Mahavir, but a few thousand years before him, there was great emphasis on interaction with nature. Preservation of nature became very important by the time of Mahavir when man had created many tools to exploit nature. And preserving mankind from nature was more important at the time of Rishabhdev when man was just beginning on his journey of civilization, of settled living, of creating a surplus. What I find fascinating in Rishabhdev's teaching of Asi, Masi, Kasi, Vanijya Vidya and so on, this is simplified by the narrators of this particular teaching into simple buzzwords like Asi, Astra or implement, Kasi, that is Krishi. Yes, it is true. But what Rishabdev was conveying was be productive, create, generate, build an affluent society. Affluence is inherent in Jainism. You cannot say that the Jain philosophy says do not be affluent. If so, disown Rishabdev. If you say so, you have to disown Rishabdev. I don't think any Jain in his right senses is willing to do that. And I would interpret that to mean create responsibility, create comprehensively. He talked of trade, he talked of agriculture, he talked of art, he talked of commerce. All this is possible only if you have the right ethical approach. You cannot create a surplus by robbing someone. You can only create a surplus by toiling to generate it. So the Jain concept is something which one needs to understand. It comes from Rishabdev's teachings. Subsequent Tirthankars have taught many other things and they have lived amazing lives till Mahavir brought in the great emphasis on ahimsa, brahmacharya, anekantvad, and so on and so forth. So I look at the principles of, let me say, Jain approach to business as not just don't do any harm, but it is to create, to generate, to build prosperity, but with the clear proviso that you shall do so responsibly. You create wealth which will outlive you. You cannot consume all the wealth you create. No matter how strong you are not able to utilize the wealth you create if you create wealth well. So wealth is not something for the individual. Wealth is something which is for society, which you can responsibly make available. But at the same time, do not beggar yourself and say, no, I'm a Jain, I don't need money, I have enough, I am going to be a sadhu. Only be a sadhu if you have reached the level of elevation and understanding where, having left Vanaprasthashram behind, you want to go into Sannyasashram if you have been a grahast all your life. Or you may be a sadhu if at an early age you have the urge to give up worldly pleasures and common man's life and you want to focus on the elevation of your own soul. But this does not mean that Jainism says do not create wealth. It does not mean that Jainism says you should not have possession, you should be poor. It says be rich, be creative, but be liberal with what you have created. Position it so that society prospers. You don't have to simply distribute and give away. If you did that, you would destroy your wealth. But you leverage it, you utilize it in order to create a better life for many people. That I consider as the real message of Jain approach to finance and the ethics behind the Jain attitude to finance.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. I mean, in all both your answers, what you're saying is, and it's very clear from what you're saying, that culture and ethics are central to your personal life and your business life. Yet, I'm sure you know about the business education curriculum, that actually culture and ethics are sidelined, and in a way, the material part is more emphasized, and more finance has, and in the last 40 years, the evidence shows that relative to the real economy, the finance economy has grown more in size and influence. So that when finance, which traditionally was a servant to business, has now become a master. So how would you say, you obviously spoke about Jain culture and business, but there are a variety of cultures in India, a huge variety of cultures. And also all of these cultures have family owned businesses, very successful, etc. uh, how would you say we should try to correct the education of finance and business to incorporate culture and ethics, which have been so central to your success and also to your self-fulfillment as a leader and pioneer?
I would say that this calls for the creation of a much more elevated understanding. And it is not something which can be done merely by a curricula correction. You can correct the curriculum, but only teaching does not get you there. The Agams have been written a few thousand years ago. The Gita exists for 3,000 years. The Bible exists for 2,000 years. But have people suddenly, because they got something in writing which has been taught to them, the Bible has been taught from pulpits for centuries. And the Gita is sung about, and the life of Krishna is sung about in temples in India for thousands of years. But are people reformed completely? The answer is no. The answer is you need these as guideposts. But what you need is a sense of responsibility to society. Above all, that needs to come from the ethics that you learn from your childhood. You cannot take a person who has grown up in an environment which is not practicing the concept of ahimsa, has no awareness of it, is not practicing or understanding the concept of aparigraha, and has grown up uh, in an environment where all your purpose in life is to make money and have a blast, then your curriculum is not going to help, even if it teaches ethics. So ethics are not, in my understanding, teachable only in the university or the school. Ethics have to be taught in the family as the base. This does not mean that only families can teach ethics. Schools teach ethics. We interact as students at different stages in our life with teachers who exemplify certain values, and we imbibe these values. We learn to respect those values. We may not fully practice those values, but a respect for a value is halfway there. And it is this input that is important. In this regard, let me try and provide a reference. If you see the teaching method in Japan or Germany, the attention paid to the young child of 6 to 10 years old is extraordinary. And the values, the behavioral aspects, the ethics that is drilled into him, that he is exposed to. For instance, the simple act of bowing and expressing your lack of ego when you confront a person or when you are before a person who is by definition older, wiser, superior to you, then you must show respect. That is a foundational value. Similarly, respecting scientific thoughts in their basis is also a foundational value. So there are many such foundational values which come through the educational system. But you can't say, I will let students study what they will in their primary school, and then once they are in the university, I will make ethical people out of them. It does not work like that. The whole educational system has to be aligned to do that. And what I have often understood and heard from so many scholars and experts in education is that till the age of about 7 or 8, the child is guided in his value by his mother more than the father. The mother imparts the values. Be kind, be soft, don't be in a hurry, do this quickly. These are impulses that he imbibes from how the mother behaves and how she teaches you. From the age of about 9 to the age of about 13, 14, just before teenage or around teenage, the child is influenced most by the teacher. What caliber of teacher you have? How does the teacher approach a subject? How does the teacher interact with you? Does the teacher respect your intellect? Does your teacher try to give you inputs which are beneficial? Is that teaching or pedagogy done in a manner which is enhancing of your self-respect? Then you imbibe those impulses, those values, that knowledge. After the age of 14 or 15, the student is dependent on peers. If you are in good company, if they are people who are respecting of society, of values, if they help each other, if they share with each other, if they care for each other, then you imbibe those values. By the time you get to university, your attitude to sharing, to caring, to being disciplined, to being not egoistical, but respectful to something which is good, very nearly already formed. So you can't take a piece of iron which has been forged and then say, okay, I will now twist it with my middle finger or left finger and create something new out of it. In those 2 years or 3 years that student is in the university, 5 years maybe, it's not easy to create a new value system. You can give him new information. If he has the competence, he can convert that information into knowledge. But to be able to make that knowledge into wisdom, he needs these values. I know of a lot of very highly educated failures. I know of a lot of many people who have not had the benefit of higher education, but are outstanding human beings with a sensitivity, with creativity, having achieved success and created worth and value, who are respected in society. So education is not the be all and end all of creating ethics. It has limited possibility to do that once the character is formed. So ethical education in the university is dependent on ethical educational standards right from the beginning. That is my own view. I'm not saying that therefore ethical finance should not be taught at all because it cannot be learned. No, of course, it can be taught, but as a reinforcement, as a method of understanding how to go about doing things. But it's not something that can create an ethical person. It can teach the person to differentiate between the better way, the humane way, the ethical way to do something compared to the crass and the generally misunderstood but happily practiced way of trying to extract the maximum.
No, thank you. That's very, very helpful. I mean, I'm not just talking about the university. There are also whole professions like accounting and finance, which are dedicated towards kind of building future professionals and educating. So in a sense, the kinds of ideas we are talking about have the potential to influence not just the university research and curriculum, but also the professional curriculum. And there is, of course, ethics is becoming a big issue, and people are talking about it. But like you said, the transformation has not really happened, and some of the reasons you gave actually are very good explanations of why that hasn't happened. But what is quite significant is the absence of cultural case studies and dialogue in the business school or in these kind of curricula. So, for example, say your grandson goes or your son goes to university as a Jain and brought up as a Jain, but actually in the university curriculum there is no reference to that culture, right? There is no dialogue about that culture. Then to some extent, and instead of that, a very material, instrumental culture disguised as a science is superimposed on it, right? So you actually end up damaging the culture that these students already bring into the classroom. So I'm quite concerned of actually transforming, especially in India, which is kind of, such an old culture, and one of the oldest living cultures of the world, and such a diverse country, that the curriculum is transformed or to incorporate some case studies, cultural case studies, and cultural explanations about how different businesses operate and how different businesses prioritize. Because everything you've said clearly puts culture at the heart of the success of your family enterprise, and over several generations, and continues to be. You've already handed it over to the next generation. So that cultural resilience that comes with business is very important. It cannot be given to others as a formula. I agree with you, right? But the very fact that it exists and that it influences. For example, I'll give you an example. One of the big MBAs in India is called FMBA, Family MBA. And I was asking students, what is the cultural component of that MBA? And they say hardly nothing. So even in the family MBA, they're not talking about, and even among the Jains, as you know, you've got Kutchi Jains, you've got Marwadi Jains, you've got Gujarati Jains, and sometimes Kutchi Jains are very good at retail. Then the Marwadi Jains are, do you see what I mean? So some are very good at industry, some are very good in service professions, like we are Oswal Jains, and we tend to go towards service professions, so that kind of thing. So what would you say to that?
No, you are right. Society that you live in has a huge influence, and that influence cannot be analyzed in great detail or quantified or transferred from one set of or one subset of society to another subset. It doesn't work so very well. But fundamentally, I strongly feel that one has to reach behind this to the important cultural aspects that need to be taught. Many years ago, my father did an experiment to bring recently married or about to be married young women in the age bracket of 18 to 24, 25 to Virayatan at Bihar. And a course of 1 month was organized where they interacted with Sadhvijis. It was not to teach them the Shastra, but to have a cultural impact on them. And they went away enthused. And many of them said that we have acquired a view of life or an understanding about our role in society and life, what we should aspire for. We have learned a lot in this time. And out of this grew the conviction, and I believe in that it is the mother who influences the child. And you cannot create a value education system unless you reach the mother. The mother is the key. Not the father. The school, yes, but of a different kind. Fundamental aspect of seva, of reducing your ego, of um being kind to other people and to animals, this the child learns at a very, very early age. And I don't see that any kind of business education which is delivered at a later age can achieve this. So, if you want to create a more ethical society, you have to reach the bottom and not the top. People who have studied for 15, 20 years to reach their PhD in whatever it is, whether it is in rocket science or whether it is in the most advanced medicine or whether it is in the most esoteric concept in finance, they have become compartmentalized. In many cases, particularly in India, the investment that that person has made has probably impoverished the family, and he has to recover that. One sees in the doctor profession in India, young men from middle class families with good brains try to become doctors. They have to pay terribly heavy fees. Many of the medical colleges are run on unethical lines where they take a lot of capitation fee to allow you into the college. That man, by the time he's 30 and he has completed his education and his housemanship and his registrarship and is ready to earn, he's hungry. And he goes with a scalpel after money. This happens. So, it is very important that even a person like a doctor, nobody becomes a doctor without a regard for human life. Nobody becomes a doctor without understanding what physical suffering is or what mental suffering is. So basically, it has to be a humane person who aspires to be a doctor. But the process of reaching there in educational terms is so adverse that often they lose sight of this and they become money makers. This is also not addressable unless you change the educational system. I do not know how it works in the UK, and I don't want to comment on it. But certainly in India, the educational system is awful. You have an artificial restriction on the number of medical colleges that can be there. The medical colleges are required to have facilities that an American medical college would envy having, and then they only allow you so many students per class. All this is done by bureaucrats in order to milk the system. This is all graft and bribery. People get around it, but it costs money. But in the end, you have a shortage. And it is this shortage which causes corruption. And it is this shortage which causes unethical practices. I strongly believe that ethics cannot be simply taught in higher education. Ethics have to be developed in a person's psyche, in his character over time. And one thing I know from my business experience over life is that the signals that you send of your intention, signals of your intention have to be consistent. If I am friendly with you today and I am not so very receptive tomorrow, I will confuse you about my intention of being nice to you. If I am consistently aloof, you may still respect me. Okay, this guy is not malicious, but he's aloof. So these signals that we give have to be right. And very often we find in life that the signals that we receive from the cinema, the signals we receive from the behavior of people in public life, the signals we receive from people we interact with everywhere are so confusing. You do not know what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, what is appreciated and what is not. This is where a disciplined society, a respectful society is important. The unfortunate thing about the liberal society of the West is that it promotes conflict. It is a very materialistic society. And I find that in the West, there is a fundamental conflict. They believe in the materialism of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, who were classical scientific thinkers with no moral or spiritual backbone or underpinning. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, Western society is Abrahamic and Christian. Christianity is pure spirituality. You have to believe in God to be a Christian, whether you know He exists or not. You have to accept that He created the world and you don't know how He did it. So this conflict is very, very strong in the West. And our education system all over the world follows a Western approach. So we don't know how important spirituality is. And by spirituality, I don't mean devotion. I mean adherence to values over the material aspects. This is something which is very, very important. If you look at Gandhi, if you look at teachers like him who were there in the 20th century, like Rabindranath Tagore, so many. They were highly intelligent people. But the amount of store they put by spirituality appears odd to today's generation. Why was Gandhi singing Vaishnava Janto Tene Kaye? And why Rabindranath was so interested in art and music? They were building human beings with a kind heart. They were trying to influence people to be sensitive. And I feel that this education is essential. It is not at loggerheads with skill education. It is not at loggerhead with knowledge of how to scientifically, precisely achieve a goal. This value education has to do with how human beings behave, what they value more and what they value less. And this can't be taught as a part of the curriculum. Curriculum can give you scientific knowledge. You spoke of chartered accountants and you spoke of lawyers. I agree with you. These professions also teach you, if you are a lawyer and you are defending a known criminal, you are duty bound to defend him and even lie within the ambit of the law, because the law is not the truth. The law is the law. So are you ethical or not? Then you find an answer to say, if I am teaching what the law says, then I am being legal and not moral. And you are finding an escape. And you do not want to confront the truth that legality and morality are not necessarily the same thing. You can be a murderer and be acquitted. And you can be innocent and be hanged. That's all law. It is not morality. So morality per se in business, in professions, is quite separate from the precision, the knowledge, the practices, the percepts of that particular profession, whether it is finance, engineering, medicine, legal, chartered accountant. Chartered accountant is nothing but another variety of a finance man. Chartered accountant's role is to ensure that the veracity of the books you keep are within the ambit of the law, and that you are following the practices and you are maintaining the discipline that is expected to be maintained by you as a responsible business, so that you can be taxed properly. so that you are accountable. But he is not the God. The problem arises when the chartered accountant is treated as the person who knows everything and who can decide everything that is right or wrong. The chartered accountant is like a lawyer. He will allow you to do something knowing that you are okay, you are on the borderline. But I can defend it. They won't take away my certificate if I say this is okay. That's your chartered accountant. You deal with this every day, because if you interpret the law in a certain way and the chartered accountant comes and says, I will approve this, but I have to write a note in your balance sheet. And you will say, no, 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 you don't write a note. Give me a balance sheet without any qualifications. Then the discussion starts of how to position it so that it is not qualified. Now, this is on the borderline of ethics and legality. Legally, you are right. Ethically, I don't know whether you can bet on it. Good businesses, honest businesses do this often because the law is not necessarily moral. The law does not understand morality. So in finance and in ethics, this is the conflict. Finance is run by the laws of the land. Ethics is run by your own appreciation of the values. And I don't see any real conflict for a person to be both legal and moral. But then you have to be restrained, and you have to be disciplined, and you have to be controlled, and you can't go to town and say, okay, I want to achieve this. I'm going to do all kinds of finagling in my balance sheet. And if my chartered accountant says I'm right, then I'm morally right. No, you are legally right. That's my view.
Thank you. I mean, one of the other distinctive features of the Dharmic traditions is a very profound understanding of the nature and limits of money. Now, you have already touched on it in some of the answers that you have given beautifully. But, you know, if we look at finance education and accounting education, there is no reference to such an understanding of the nature of money and the limits of money. Now, you are a multimillionaire. Now, you know, most people have not come to your level of success or wealth or enterprise, but kind of they aspire towards that. But you have actually you have been able to understand and almost transcend the limits of money, understand and transcend the limits of nature. So what would be the tips to finance researchers and professionals about how to go about understanding and actually communicating the nature and limits of money?
Well, money can give you resources, money can give you connections, money can give you luxuries. Money has never ever been accused of giving you happiness. That is the limitation of money. Money is wonderful to have, but it cannot give you happiness. Happiness comes from giving money, not from earning money.
Wow.
And giving money is not possible unless first you have earned it. So you must earn in order to have the resources to be able to give. If you want to be happy, don't stop in the middle of the ladder where you made the money and then you are not taking the next steps where you are enabled to give. I give you the example of my father. My father, at the age of 22, was a freedom fighter and went to jail for 1.5 years. In 1932, the British jails in India were cruel. There was no category of political prisoner. They were all criminals and they were caned and beaten. So he was that kind of a courageous man. And he persisted in the freedom struggle and he participated in various activities, was an active member of the Congress party, was close to many, many people. But he gave up after India's independence. He got out of it and he went into industry. And he made a grand success of his enterprises. If you told me that I'm successful and wealthy, I want to humbly submit that I'm wealthy. I'm enjoying the success of the previous generations. But yes, my father created great amount of wealth. And he was an entrepreneur and he did pioneering things. Then he went into his Vanaprasthashram, where he gave up his business. He never ever signed a piece of paper in the company after he stepped down from the boards. You could go to him and say, I want your advice, I have this problem, and he would say, all right, you put down whatever he was doing, give you undivided attention, and we'll give you his opinion. And you knew, because he had said so many times that this is my view. I'm sharing my view so that you have another aspect to look at, but you take the decision you want. So, and in that period, he was doing charity and he was building institutions and schools and whatnot. So when he was very ill and he was dying and I was in the hospital with him, I asked him, I said, Baba, you've done so many things. As a young man, you were a fiery freedom fighter. As a businessman, you were a very astute, very creative entrepreneur, innovator. And later, you did so much charity and you changed so much. I remembered my father from my childhood was a very strong, stern man. And I saw my father as an old man. He was kindness himself. So I said, what did you enjoy most in your life? And he said, without a doubt, I can tell you that the third phase, when I was doing charity, the most enjoyable time of my life. Yes, I enjoyed my freedom fight. Yes, it was exhilarating to do good business. But there is no joy like doing charity. This value is something which is invaluable. The understanding of this is central to ethics in business. If you do your business in order to be able to be so rich that you have surplus which you can give. After you give the surplus, there is still a lot available for giving to your loved ones. You made it. But if you say that no, you shouldn't make money, then that's not right. And if you say that you should only give away what you have, that's also not right. The conflict in the socialist system is that they do not understand the concept of producing a surplus which you can retain and which you can give in the manner in which you think is right. And what you think is right is only right if it is qualified by your understanding of the principles of aparigraha, ahimsa, anekant. But these are fundamental concepts. These concepts define Indian value system. I'll take 2 minutes more to explain to you my view of how the Indian value system, what is called Sadharana Dharma, common values of India, how did it evolve? If you read Vedas, there is no morality in Vedas. Vedas are pure and simple rituals. Appease Agni, do this, appease the wind, do that, and so on and so forth. I may have the good fortune to have good rain, and therefore I submit to you. This is Veda or Ved. The Ved, the Rig Ved was written or started to be written 4,200 years ago only. The Upanishads came nearly 1,000 years after the Vedas. On the other hand, the Jain tradition, if you are not seduced by the Western thinker to say Mahavir was the founder of the Jain tradition, And you believe that Rishabdev started it and it came down through many outstanding individuals who contributed so greatly and who were so elevated. Then you know that Jainism, which from day one was pure value system, not believing in a creator God, believing that you have to be restrained, believing that you have to give, believing that you have to forgive, believing that you should not be having too many possessions because it is bad for you. It's not good for you to be attached to too many things. Keep a distance between yourself and the most loved one. This is Jainism. These values came into the Upanishads. The Upanishads is the value of the Sadharan Dharma of India, and the Gita is its most eloquent expression. The Gita is nothing but Jainism, presented differently by Vedicists who realized that this Shraman tradition is so rich in ethics that we have to accept these. So they say that there occurred a renaissance in Vedicism, and then they realized that they have to look at values, and I agree, all of that happened. Fundamentally, they lifted the whole thing out of the Shaman tradition and its stock of values and incorporated it in a beautiful, elegant manner which the world believes. The Gita is a fantastic statement. But this value system is common to Jains and to non-Jain, non-Abrahamic people in India. Whether you look at Sikhism, you look at Pauranic Hinduism, you look at the Buddhists, the values are common. The metaphysics will vary. Whether they are more devotional or more rational is a separate discussion. The values are the same. It is those values that make India. And therefore you find in India, in many communities, in Sikhs, in Hindus, among Marwadis, Gujaratis, Kachis, as you say, South India, you have forgotten South India. Huge Jain population in South India. So they have these values. And on the one hand are these values, on the other hand are the 4 ashrams of life, with clear directions of how you should behave in each ashram. What should be your guiding force? This creates the value system of India. And therefore, I feel that the West, which does not have the benefit of this at all, which is looking at Platonic logic and which is looking at Abrahamic devotion, these are mutually contradictory aspects. So there is huge amount of confusion. Martin Luther was forced to, in the end, says that you have to have faith, otherwise Christianity will fall. Islam has found a way around by saying, you must believe. If you don't believe, you are not Muslim. And the whole world must believe in order that we can treat it equally. Those are their ways of doing things. But in India, we have found a different way, and it is very ethical. I had the privilege of meeting the Dalai Lama a few years ago, 3 years ago in Bombay. And somebody asked him a question. There was a discussion. What is Dharma? It was, I think, a young girl who said, what is Dharma? The Dalai Lama's answer was classic. He said, religion or dharma is the process of enhancing value, enhancing the belief in values. Enhancing belief in values, that is religion. That is spirituality. That is ethics. So if you can incorporate the belief in values in the educational system, you won.
Wow, thank you. That's very, very helpful. Unfortunately, maybe it's because of modernity as well, but I see also in the West, even among the Jains, and I'm not I'm not saying all Jains, but many Jains, especially the successful entrepreneurs, they are finding that in charity they lose control of their wealth. So it's not just parting with their wealth, but also losing the control and the investment cycle that wealth gives them. And I guess, you would say that they have become parigrahi, but it is quite sad that they are not able to see what you are saying about that charity is actually the source of real lasting happiness, because I do support a number of charities and I try and help them with fundraising, and I have a very extensive network of contact. And I'm sure you have also spoken to some of the American Jains as well, and you see, and that's a tragedy, really. Uh, it's just, yeah, they're intoxicated almost by the wealth, by the success.
This is inevitable. The value or the meaning of words is subject to your own receptivity, your own understanding, your own impulses. So, therefore, different people interpret the same word to mean different things. And what gives pleasure to somebody does not necessarily give pleasure to the other. What one understands by giving and the joy of giving is not understood by somebody else. It is not that they are wrong, but they think differently. That's Anekantvad. That is his view. So far as he is not doing anything malicious and keeping his wealth and employing it well, I should not complain. I would say that the person who is doing charity is doing a good job. And the person who is accumulating wealth and accumulating in a manner that is beneficial to society is doing no harm. So I don't think we are able to make highly charitable businessmen out of every person. We can't. And we shouldn't even try.
Okay, thank you. No, that's very helpful. So one final question. I think we've covered a lot of tremendous ground in this short interview. You earlier touched on risk. And again, of course, we have a whole science of risk management and risk calculation and all that. But I think the way you understood risk and the way you defined risk was quite different, quite organic, depending on your relationships, on the trust, and on your understanding and experience of the business. In fact, actually, that's another thing that in business education we almost diminish. We don't think experience has any value. It's all science. Yeah, if you give people a method, then they can succeed. That's all. In a way. But the way you say it, and in a sense, risk also comes from ownership as well, and having your own skin in the game, if you like. So I wonder if you could expand a little bit about risk and risk management from your ethical perspective, because that's quite unusual.
I'd like to say two things. I want to give you the example of the definition my grandfather always used to make. He said, look at your wealth in a manner so that you can divide it into 4 quadrants. 1/4 of your wealth should be in land because it is the stablest of assets. 1/4 of your wealth should be in gold and jewelry. It appreciates. It's a pleasure and a joy to have. It's liquid enough and solid enough. 1/4 of your wealth should be invested in business, which is productive, which employs people, which gives you something to do, which is useful to society, from which you can earn more. more than what you get simply by value appreciation. In 1/4 you keep as cash, which you can either lend or which you utilize for your own business, but keep it fully liquid so that it is available to you at all times. Now, he did not mean 25% in a precise manner. What he meant was divide your wealth and keep it in a manner so that you cover these bases. There is a huge risk management lesson in this. And that lesson is, if you put all your money in cash and lend it, you might lose all of it. If you keep all of it in gold and for some reason gold plummets, you make a big loss. If you put all of it in land and the government decides to take away your land because they want to build a military camp over there, you are going to get tuppence for the value that you invested. So divide your assets wisely is one lesson. And I think risk management must look at this. Now, how do you divide your assets properly? If you talk to people who are family wealth managers and so on, and they will give you long lectures on how to do it. But I always find my grandfather's homily is something which is very, very valuable. Not that these experts are wrong, but eventually they say the same thing in more complicated language. The second aspect which I want to touch upon, which is not risk, but which is related to prosperity, it's a story about my interaction with a few prominent people. I had gone to the inauguration of a science college in rural Ahmednagar district, from which the Firodia family comes. The person who created that science college is a family friend for generations. So he invited me to preside over the function. So I went. Speaking at the function was the famous Professor Dr. Mashelkar, who is India's czar for technology, highly respected in government circles, on the board of great companies like Reliance and Tata's. A scientific mind. He's a fellow of the Royal Society, which is a very coveted kind of a laurel. So Mashelkar, in his speech, recited that the former president of India, Abdul Kalam, gave a mantra. But because he was a scientist, his mantra was a formula. So he said, E is equal to F. Education is equal to future. And of course, it's not wrong. Since I was presiding over that meeting, I had the last word. So I said that I'm not disputing that education is important for future. But I strongly believe that education alone gets you nothing. I know a lot of educated idiots. I know a lot of illiterate wise people. I know a lot of people who don't have high-flying degrees, but have success and satisfaction in life. And I know a lot of people who have achieved so much, but are not happy, not settled. So my formula is E plus E plus E is equal to FP. So Mashelkar promptly said, explain yourself. What is this formula? So I said, education plus enterprise, willingness to create, plus ethics, disciplined behavior is equal to future prosperity. E plus E plus E is equal to FP. Now, if you are looking at the key for success, and if you say that as a general observation, one can very readily say that the Jain community is among the most affluent communities in the world. It's a minuscule community. They are not going around brandishing swords and saying, give me your money. They create. I know a few Jain crooks. I know a whole lot of good people who believe in values. And I also know some people who are saintly. But by and large, the Jain community has a greater appreciation, understanding, and innate impulse from their family values to respect ethics and to be enterprising. Therefore, they go for education, multiply it with enterprise, and expand it with ethics, and create wealth, charity, happiness for themselves, and benefit for society. So I strongly believe that ethics are important. But ethics is not a formula, or it's not something you can go to Fortnum and Mason and say, give me one dabba of ethics. You won't get it.
No, thank you. We have covered a lot, and you've been very generous with your time. I'm I'm working on a book about this, so obviously I'll send you a copy. I reckon it'll take me a while to finish it,
You can
but
take it.
your interview has been really panoramic, and has also given me a lot of food for thought about how to extend this kind of research. So thank you so much.
Will you be so kind as to give me a copy of this recording?
Absolutely, I can do that straight away. Yeah.
Right.
Did you want audio or video or both?
Both, please.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. The video is quite a big file, so I'll have to find out. I may have to post it to you, put it onto a drive and post it or something.
Yeah, no problem.
But audio, I can do. Audio is easy, but I'll work it out. Thank you. No problem.
All right.
It was
Thank you
very-
very much. And good luck with your book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaskar.